Welcome back to another episode of Bobberbob and the Softail jockey shifter build. Today we're going to be looking at the mechanism to drive the clutch actuator. We have the fitted clutch from the bike. We're going to be removing that cable probably in another episode, but just to get the actuation going of the mechanism of the clutch being pulled as it was on the lever but by the foot, we're going to have to work something out. So I've removed the footboard and I've got that on the bench, and I've done a little bit of work ahead of time, and I'll explain that in a minute because it was a bit of a job to get us to a point where we can now do some looking together. So that's where it mounts down the bottom here, and we can utilize some of the mounting points on the footboard, and we can get the pedal actuator for the new cable working. Let's get to the bench. Well, here we are at the bench with a few illustrative parts to show you the journey. So I took the footboard off. There's the mounting points you can see for the gear selector unit, which goes there. I've put all tape on it to try and protect it. And I've removed the rear set on the old pedal shaft and put the one that I've previously made on there, which I spoke of in another video, but just with one lever to be like a foot clutch. So those are off the bench. I did a little bit of work fitting this up on the bench, or on the bike rather. And the thing was, it was just such a cardboard aided design, and then I had a piece of steel like this process to get to this. I just wasn't too keen on filming it all because it would just have taken hours, and it did take hours. So this plus that minus that gave us one of these, and as you can see, the part sort of resembles that piece of steel there. So it's very heavy gauge. Not sure of the actual width, but it must be a good 5 millimeters. So it's pretty thick, but that's where the cable will pass through. And this is how it goes on to the bike at the point that we're at anyway. So that's the plate there. So that will go on in its original position, but then we're going to run this through on the back side of this, like this. And I've had to make some longer bolts, and I've got some bolts, but I've had to tap them a bit longer or thread extend them. So I'll do that to the second one. And basically this will go onto here. This is the idea at the moment. And the second one will go on and be trimmed down, obviously, but that'll hold it into position. And then what we have here is a little bit of a built-in, a little bit of a built-in stopping mechanism on there as well. Just try and capture that thread. There we go. And as you can see, this piece has, in the cutout, a natural beginning and end stopping point. And I can refine that, I'll tune that, like the cable. So the cable will come down through here in its resting position because it'll be sprung from the clutch basket end. And then you can extend the cable like you would with your front lever on your bike, and it will give you some travel. So it'll just pull down through there. So that's actually worked out to be quite, I want to say easy, but it hasn't been easy because it's taken hours, and it's got to this point where I've had to put a little kink in it to just, because this kicks the width of the metal sort of kicks out a bit, so just to sort of match it. But then I've realized that if I cut that out, then it actually gives a natural mechanism to start and stop the cable. And that sort of worked in quite nice, like a bit of weight reduction or something. So I'm going to tap the rest of that out, and then it might be time to offer that onto the bike and see how the cable sits, and then we'll have to undo the bike at the cable end and then fit that, and then work out a way to make sure that the cable is secure. So tap that, disassemble, put it on the bike, get the cable up to it, and see if we've got a starting point, and then we can reroute the cable. It's a 1/4 inch thread. And I'm going to mix my measurements here, but I don't have to go all the way down. I only have to go down as far as, or I can leave 20 mil of shaft or shank left. I don't know what they're from. I think that's packaging from a dryer, but they just help extend the force or the leverage on the bar. At this point, I think these look quite light. They're only quite sort of slender bolts, because all it's had to do is keep a gear changing pedal in place, and now we're sort of asking a bit more of that area of the bike. So either I'm going to make I'll test it, but either I'm going to make the bolts bigger, or I'll just have to tap out the holes on the footboard, which I don't really like the thought of, because that's mucking around with the original equipment and I'm not too keen. I'm quite keen to sort of preserve everything to be put back to original. Or I make a supporting bracket that goes onto the frame from the piece of metal that I've shaped up to be the cable holder, and then that might be a better way of looking at it. So let's get this done and then we can get it onto the bike. Right, it's a bit breezy out, so hopefully the wind won't be too bad. But there's 2 anchor points here and a spare one there, which doesn't have a hole in it, but you can see where it was. Maybe it's for a different style of foot pedals. I was thinking that could be the one that we could use if we need to. So I'll just, I'll tighten them up later, but I'll just get it going first. I have to say, everything's aluminium these days, and everything Harley used to be proper steel. Right, so that's solid, and that's solid, I have to say. It's only going to be doing a fairly light duty. So that looks actually quite nice. It's a pretty substantial piece of steel, and that's going to help me, I think. Right, I've got the cable on this side. It's just sort of sitting fairly loosely, but imagine it's coming in over the top here, because I'm also wanting to not cut it. This is the old cable. We will get rid of that, but I'll put that on the inside. So imagine that comes down through there. It goes through the eyelet and then onto the end of that shaft, and then that sits in there, as Ace Ventura says. Like a glove. I tell you though, getting to that looks like a simple piece of fabrication. It probably took 6 hours. It was cutting and trimming and sanding and cutting some more, and I've tried to, you know, reduce the size of it as I've gone. So, oh, that washer is tight. I don't like it. I don't like it. Yes, it's not like I've seen better days, but I could probably shim that with some plastic washers as well, just a bit of anti-rub. Right, and the idea... Oh, you plonker. If I rub it, it'll go away. This is typical. I do things after the fact, because before the fact, I didn't think it would need doing. It's all right, it was only a tiny little knockage. Right, I will trim that. It's very, very slight rubbing. But the idea is, and I'll move you again, cable comes down from around there somewhere. We will route that, but then comes down into the top of the bracket and onto this little mechanism, which pulls with enough angle difference that it's not sort of pulling the cable like that each time. It's actually pulling it quite, you can quite see it, quite straight. I like that. And another angle in there. And then this should hopefully be the up and down position. So I am noticing that that's not quite hitting the inside. It's bottoming out here, but that's okay. I can put a bit of weld on there, or an adjust nut, or just something to give it a bump stop. In fact, I'll set the clutch play as part of this whole process. So we'll probably set it to there so it bumps out nice and high, like so it's not too low. And then we'll fine tune this lower setting as to what equals a pulled clutch, because that sort of goes home quite nicely there. I like that. It's just sort of binding slightly, which we can fix, that's okay. So next job will actually have to be the other end of this cable, which is, there's my other one, mocked up with a bungee cord, but that's it in there, this piece. This has to come off, which means that this has to come off and this has to come off. But I mean, you know, it's part of the journey, and then that's the other part of the cable. So we'll swap the cable out, and then we'll know exactly what our free play setting needs to be, and then we can finish the bracket and paint it, bake it, fit it. Then I think that will be it, because that's done. Perch is done. I can measure the play up here in a moment, and that will be done when it's installed. In fact, that's come out a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. So then we're ready to ride it. But first things first, eh? Let's take the top ones. It looks like we're going to fit. Right, goggles on, because we're going to be dealing with a snap ring, and it's going to be this one. But I want to just undo the cable. He says he'd like to undo the cable. I did crack it earlier, but golly, oh golly. I'll undo the snap ring. If you are a Harley mechanic watching me, I apologise. There we are. One snap ring out. Then that comes out. You flip it over, and then there's the cable end. So that looks like it's going to work perfectly, which is great. Now we just need to try and unscrew this, because it was very, very tight, but we might just pop the little ramp out first so we don't lose anything. Now I've got it going, I can just hold it and carefully spin the casing. Now, oh, there it is. There's a little O-ring. That's good. Okay, we will deroute the cable while this is open to the elements, and we get the other cable. So I will put some Loctite on this one, because the other one had it on. Seems to be Loctite the world, doesn't it, with Harleys? Okay, so that looks in order. Just had a bit of trouble starting it, but now we're good. Now it's a slightly shorter bolt type of fitting, but I think we'll be okay, because you don't have to swing on it like Tarzan, but to be fair, it is a little bit, oh, we might be right there. Right, that'll nip it, and I'll put it back on, and then we'll be able to do it up properly later. So, glasses back on with the 3 bearings in it. Put this in that way, and then flip it over. Very clever. And you can see the rod, I think the rod from the other side sits in there. Now the snap ring. Oh, golly. There we go. Let's now route this around and hook it into our bracket and see if we can get some action. I'm thinking we're going to have some reworking to do at the other end. Looking at that, there's no extension left. Well, I found the secret sauce to this is that you can pop the plate off, which I figured you must be able to, but you just lift up the deck on the foot plate, and there's two little pins that slide each side, so we should be able to get it back on a whole lot quicker because we can go straight in the end. Gosh, getting it off was a nightmare. There we are. See, it's got little rubber spacer keepers that it locks into. The cable comes down. That's a dreadful car sound. Goes through the holder, nice. Now this is configured from last time I used it years ago. And as you can see, because of this cable length, the eyelet just makes it past the thickness of this, which means that when that's in its up position, it's short. So I'm going to have to reconfigure this shaft and end, and I'm going to cut that off and move it to the top. And then it'll be, I think, perfect going through the top there. And then just re-weld it back on. So I'm going to cut this piece off and relocate it, because that can only go one way. So as usual, half of the time is spent fettling and finestering around. So what we've now got is, again, the same arrangement. Cable comes down through there. I've cleaned that up and I've yet to finally finish it, but that's hard bolted in. That's at its top position, and there is a line going across there which represents the top of the cable ferrule down to the center of the eye of the cable loop, which is 25 millimeters or 19 from the underside of here. That comes through and it's going to go onto this bolt that I'm going to weld onto there. And the bolt will then have this little plastic spacer. That's where the eyelet will go on. Then I've got an aluminium washer just to be a slightly softer metal, and then this nut, that's just for the other side of the there where the goes up against the pedal. And then once that is in its home position with a smidgen of extra, I will trim that and then cotter pin it, or just put a pin through it to stop it spinning off, and that will be the way to get that on and off. So we're going to clean the end, mark that, weld it on, and then we should be getting close to getting it on and trying it. Don't want to weld with the washer on, it'll cook it. All right, let's get to the welding bench. Back to this position where we'll put this back on, but we've got the mechanism all lined up and everything now. So we will give it a trial fitting, and hopefully the cable will work. That now hits at the top and should be perfect for this cable to come in over the top. I may have to put it on a assemble it off the bike and then offer it up. Actually, I'll just do that. Right, after much fettleage, I have got to this point because it was just so back and forth between here and the bench. So cable runs down, a couple of soft washers on each side, a spacer and then a soft washer. It does run the metal on the bolt shank, but I'm going to put a liner on it, and I've pinned the nut so that it's got no way of coming off but is easily removed. It's still slightly tight. It's got a little bit of before it begins to take the tension now, but everything seems to be really good. I mean, okay, the cable just is slung over the front and we'll have to work out where we mount it, but the top here I've ground away slightly and I may have to bend that over a bit more, but this bit here represents hard open, but then you go right down, that represents hard closed, hard clutch engaged, and it doesn't touch there. So that would, to me, be like the perfect sort of throw. I'll just dress that edge up nicely, but that little space represents the throw of your lever. So I'll just need to route the cable, put a holder on it somewhere. That's the tape from the last holder, and that seems to be engaging. So with 2 stop points, so that's really good. Nothing hits, it's all solid as. It just needs some slightly last sort of minute fettling, and we can get it painted and on there. I don't have the lever on there. I'm almost like keen to see if it works, of course, but who wouldn't be? And I need to check my gearbox oil, but I think that'll be fine, to be fair. Sun's right behind me, sorry for the shadows. So looking good.